again, gang. Welcome. Here comes the picture. There we are. Good to see you. Let's start by standing up today, if you don't mind. I'm just going to put a bit of extra light on. It's pretty light, but it gets darker. We're starting with our feet apart. Kayotsaga, I call it, which is based on a practice that is sometimes done in this posture, a practice that we find in Jainism. Arms by the side, arms long. The tirthankaras, as they're sometimes called, are the arhats, or they're even called buddhas sometimes in the Jaina tradition. Many of them have very long arms in iconography. So say something, I think, about the feeling tone. Remember, iconography often represents feeling tones, the feeling tone of the practice. So imagine your arms are long and relatively heavy. And as they draw down, you can almost imagine you're holding very weighty shopping bags. Perhaps you've got all of your oat milk in for the next 2 or 3 weeks. And so each bag is filled with your oat milk of choice. Different companies are available. Other milks are available. Other drinks are available. Something weighty. And as the shoulders go down, the chest goes up. The legs have some intelligent tone or conversational tone, which is a way that we describe this sort of thing in Vajrasattva Yoga. Intelligent tone is tone which is awake. It's not just sort of on rather than off, which is not awake. It's just a habit. Conversational tone is tone that's in dialogue with the response that comes. You tone a muscle, you see the response, you adjust the tone accordingly. Remember, those bags are heavy. Now, for some reason, some magical, mysterious reason, 2 extra cartons have appeared in each bag. Okay, so it's a bit heavier still. Now, as this weight pulls the arms down to avoid spinal compression, we push the spine up. And this relative sensation, which I describe as inner body up, outer body sloughing off, has a profound effect in terms of releasing muscles. Really helps muscles like the trapezius release, which extends to the lateral third of the collarbones. It naturally switches on the pelvic floor, which we just feel as a sort of, how do you describe it, stability. In some traditions, the muladhara is positioned at the pelvic floor. Mula means root. Adhara means support. So muladhara, root support. So there's a sense of being supported from the root, as it were, the root of the central channel, which in quite a few systems is the pelvic floor, and certainly in Hatha Yoga, it's the pelvic floor. So this Kayotsaga is a practice that I think you can really milk, you can get a lot out of. Let's just say another few seconds, see if you can imagine another carton of oat milk. I buy Oatly. I'm not sponsored by them. I wish I was, because it seems like gallons of the stuff goes from this house. But anyway, I've got one on each, one extra, and it's pulling the arms down and pushing the crown up. We breathe through the nose, and there's this juxtaposition between the very strong and powerful down that has to be countered by a strong elevation up through the central channel. Okay, I love it. So we could just do that for ages, but we won't. We'll have a little bit of movement instead, side to side. Bring the feet a little closer to each other. Just place your fingers on your shoulder tops. Now, Hatha Yoga, we find that like the Hatha Vyasa Padati is a text where there's some dynamic movements. So this is reminiscent of actions there. So the elbows come together in front and behind the head. The Hatha Vyasa Padati, in my memory, I think it's something like the 17th century. So it's a relatively late text, Hatha Abhyasa Padati. The Padati is like the path or the way or the footsteps, the footpath. And Hatha Abhyasa, to practice. So it's the way to practice Hatha yoga, hatha abhyasa padati. So different directions, back and forth, back and forth. Actually, this is one of the actions that I learned when I first did my first teacher training course in Kathmandu, and which finished. Well, it went through the whole of April 1992. It's a month only. It's one of those month-only courses. But it got me at a good time. I was 21 when I went in, 22 when I came out. So it got me at a good time. Once you're loose, take a breath or two. Jaw soft, eyes soft, throat soft. Now we're going to stretch. So we're going to have one hand down and the other arm up. Lightly tone the tummy. That keeps the lower back long. And feel a buoyancy at the pelvic floor. A buoyancy at the pelvic floor, like someone's pulling a puppet up by its strings. Inhale, stretch up. Exhale, gently fold over. But the more you go over, the more you feel this sort of counter rise, gentle, intelligent, up through the pelvic floor and through and beyond, through the energetic center of the body, the energetic center. Don't hold the breath, study and breathe. Inhale calmly and slowly. Come up, well done. Arms by the side for a moment, Tadasana. Breathing deep. Eyes soft, pelvic floor attentive to that. Raise the other arm when you're ready. Again, let's get that little bit of tone, the in-up tone on the tongue. Really helps with the pelvic floor as we move over. And then I hope you can feel that there's a clear relationship between going over and drawing up in the pelvic floor. Like if you came up a bit, the pelvic floor is not drawing up as much. You come down a bit, it's drawing up more. That's kind of what we want to investigate in terms of energy, in terms of an energy body movement. Don't hold the breath, study to disappear, like swadhyaya for Ishvara Pranitanana or Tanani. Inhale. Oh, isn't that good? I hope you liked it. I did. Take a breath. Feel free to shake or shimmy or not, whatever feels useful here and now. We've got the sensible or the silly way. Sensible way that most people with wisdom will do is to bend the left knee and reach down for the foot and take hold of the big toe. The silly way is to do that with the leg just coming up straight and take hold that way. Either way, you're holding your big toe. So it makes it a padangushta, holding a big toe posture. Other hand on the hip, the leg can be bent or straight. So mine's straight, but it doesn't mean it has to be. And the foci is on the meditative spaciousness that's connected with a mental spaciousness that we're investigating at the groins of the standing leg, inner groin, front groin. Gluteal crease should be what the Iyengar school called cutting in. I think it's a good instruction. I like it, cutting in. Okay. Bring the leg down. You can do it, bent or straight, probably better bent. Take a breath or two, have a moment. If it, all we're interested in is abhyasa vairagya bhyam tan nirodha, practice that is spacious, like the sort of stira sukham asanam, practice that is easy, practice that is relaxed. This is all Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. It says practice should be relaxed. If you want to transcend, should relaxed. The effort that we make should be relaxed effort. And then that leads the mind to non-duality. Raise the other leg in probably the sensible way, or you can do the silly way if you're as silly as me, and breathe through the nose. Or maybe you are as silly as me, but just not in this particular way. And then it's study. So that means investigation. Ihipasiko dhamma, inviting investigation. It's a term from Buddhism. Ihipasiko dhamma, inviting investigation. Cutting in, the gluteal crease, lifting up, the front thigh. Study, svadhyaya, for the purpose of disappearing into that which knows. Ishvara. Okay, bring your leg down. You can bend it or bring it straight. Catch a breath, have whatever you need in terms of movement and glide and so on, so that there's a clear sense of fluidity. Within that sense of fluidity, which you remember the Yoga Sutra highly encourages, the hands come onto the hips. All the yoga traditions that I'm aware of encourage fluidity, flow. Even the Hatha tradition, which we know Hatha means with force, is only trying to be, it's more like with dynamism. Because the Hatha means dynamism, or to some extent determined, being determined. Huh? But that doesn't mean, still the yamas are important in Hatha yoga. So, yeah. Back toes in, front foot and leg out, turning on the ball of the foot, finishing off the turn on the heel, breathing through the nose. Some Hatha texts tell us very, very clearly that the practice should be done slowly, slowly. Pelvic movement, we just focus on pelvic movement, so our hands are on the pelvis, and we're treating the pelvis like a bowl or a jug that we want to tip water out, or not literally, metaphorical. As you tip, imagine it's like a bowl that you're tipping, and then your hand comes down somewhere on the shin or wherever it comes to. Breathing through the nose, eyes soft, brain soft, throat soft. Deep, expressive, organic, and natural. Let's stretch that top arm further over. Deep, expressive, organic, and natural. It's still a meditation, of course, which means it's an absorption foci. Inhale, come up. And feet face forwards, hands on the hips. Let's take deep breaths, plural. So you just come and go and come and go. Perhaps we find ourselves organically, naturally investigating the sensations, the living sensations of the pelvic floor. Back toes in, front foot and leg out, turning on the ball of the foot, finishing off the turn on the heel. Should leave you with heel to arch alignment, but we'll check, of course, and then we'll double check. We're stretching the arms out. Oh, actually, no, let's do it the way we did it before on the other side. Just get that bowl and just tip it like you're sort of sluicing the water in the bowl. And then we want to just tip that water out. It reminds me of the times when I've been at a yoga, teaching a yoga holiday or yoga retreat at a place called Yoga Magic, which sadly doesn't exist anymore. But I must contact the owner because he's talking about making a new one. Anyway, the women there used to water the gardens using these big, almost like gourd-like bowls that they'd carry on their heads and then pour the water out, sometimes through their hands. So they wouldn't have a watering can, but they'd pour it out. So similarly with your pelvis, pour as you tip. The pelvis tips. Stretch top arm up. Maybe if you're calm, up and over. It's an option. Don't hold the breath. Remember, all the time we're looking to be relaxed. Certainly something I need to remind myself. It's relaxed. That's mentioned in Patanjali, I think, 247. Basically, it's 246 to 248 that Patanjali talks about this approach, being relaxed. Inhale, coming all the way back up, turning the feet forwards, hands on the hips, breathing through the nose. Again, find the pelvic floor. So don't hold the breath, just tune in. It's actually, I think it's so magical because we're tuning in on the pelvic floor, which is spontaneous and alive. Walk the feet towards each other, left to right and right to left, and kick out, stretch out in your own way. So we've done several stretches for the sides of the body, and this is also lateral. We'll bring the feet together. We stand in Tadasana, which earlier we talked about as if we're holding bags of, I selected oat milk because it's just the heaviest thing that I can think that I buy. I don't buy bottles of wine. And so and we do get through a lot here. So I've got 6 in each bag in this scenario. Right? So the cornstarch bags are, at threat of breaking, but they're just about holding together in this imaginal scenario. And the arms are being pulled down very dynamically by the weight. But if you don't push up the spine, then it feels like the spinal discs are getting compressed as the weight of the shopping bags pull you down. So you then pull up, press up. So you've got 2 dynamic actions. The weight, the pull down, very dynamic. Let's add an extra carton of oat milk to each bag, and then another one to each bag, 2 more in each. Oh, now you can imagine it really pulling. So now you've got to really drive up. So good for the scalenes, so good for the trapezius. These are muscles around the neck, front of the neck, and round towards the sides and back of the neck. When you get a Tadasana just right, it's meditative, profound, and strong. Let's release, and we're ready for Vrikshasana. So I mentioned the Hatha Abhyasa Padati, but Vrikshasana is much older than anything you'll find there. Let's bring up the foot as high as you can. So if it can, we want it to the top of the inner thigh, but it's fine for it to cup the knee. We don't want to press the heel on the knee, but it's fine for it to cup the knee. Bringing the hands to prayer helps balance straight away. Well, of course, you can also use a wall or a chair, and wobbling is totally fine. No problem with that at all. You breathe naturally. Keep your eyes soft. Keep the brain relaxed. This is sort of moment to moment meditation, actually. It's moment to moment meditation. Okay. It's another one I could, happily, there's so much detail in it. Could happily spend a while here. But we'll release the hands and place the foot and take a deep breath, because there's a very strong chance that you, like me, were holding the breath a bit during that. So let it go. Let yourself go a little sort of more natural, sahaja, which also means spontaneous, and breathe easy. And when you're ready, go ahead and raise up the other heel, still breathing through your nose if you can, and then continue when you're ready to bring the leg up as high as it can go if possible. So top of the thigh is a good place to go. And nothing wrong with it having motion, like a surfer is in motion. But what we really want is, first of all, the sort of tapas to get us on the mat. Well, we've succeeded. Here we are. And then we take that tapas and we take it to svadhyaya. So we become fascinated. We study. We become absorbed in the minutiae and the subtle. We're passionate about that. We're bringing some of the passion associated with tapas, a word that comes from a root that means to be hot or to heat up. Tap. And eventually this fascination leads to the Ishvara Pranidhanani. Just surrendering yourself, throwing yourself in front of, surrendering yourself to that which knows, that which is unaffected by time and by affliction and by action and by stored up stuff. Klesha karma vitaka shayera paramistaha purusha visheshwa ishvaraha. Great. Release calmly, slowly. Take a breath or two and have a little bit of motion. Just a little bit of motion. Now turn that motion into a little bit of twisting. Be mindful of the knees. So as you twist towards one side, let the knee on that side come forwards. It's just a gentle twisting. Again, this kind of actions or actions similar to this. We can find actions similar to this in the Hatha Abhyasa Padati. And the idea in that text, which is a late text that also includes practices with ropes, the idea is that Hatha takes the form of dynamic stirring up of blocked or stuck energy so that it can return to its Vyana Vayu state, all over energy or wind. Vayu means wind. And a few more of these little rounds. Remember, keep it soft. Let the knees bend as you turn towards this one side. The knee will bend forwards. It's a nice thing to do for a while if you find your own way to do it. And I could stay doing that for quite a while, but we're going to slowly release, let the fingers wiggle, take a breath or two or three or four, or even five. And we're going to take a brick block and take a generous stride, facing towards the short end of the mat. I'm going to bring the foot that's closest to you forwards first. And if you happen to have a setup like mine, you should bring the foot closest to me forwards first. Brick block if you've got one. Other kinds of block are fine, or even something like a kilner jar. When I first started teaching the Zoom classes back in the, those weird times that we went through, I taught from the kitchen. And so I was always using kilner jars and things like that, of course. I find need to talk about that in the past like that. Anyway, opposite hand to the front leg is the hand that raises your whatever you're using. Inhale, exhale, extend from the inner groin of the back leg. Now, I like to cross over to the little toe side of the foot, but it's often better for balance to be on the big toe side of the foot. You've got whatever height suits you, and that's going to be relative to several things: how long your legs are, how long your arms are. Those are going to be big factors. So this is the Parivrita Trikonasana. And you breathe through your nose if you can. Lots of subtle play. If you feel a little stuck, do check that you're not too narrow across the width of the mat. Of course, you don't, some people have got very long arms, and you might feel in that case, there's no requirement for the block. The block's there to stop us side flexing the trunk, because if you side flex the body, then the nature of the facet joints along the spinal column is that if you side flex the body, the facet joints, when you try to turn, bite down on each other, and they can't turn then. They're kind of limited. So extend and breathe and be calm, very, very calm. Extend and breathe. Notice if there's any sort of desperation or gripping, grasping, grabbing. We want to be relaxed. Patanjali tells us overtly, and this is where he's overtly talking about yoga postures, right? Some people say, oh, he doesn't talk about yoga postures, but the Bhasha lists 15 postures, and the Bhasha is probably written by Patanjali. Okay, inhale, come on up. Good job. We're going to do the other side, obviously. I'm turning around to face the other end of my mat. That way I can still face you. That's an option you have too. Or you can just step the other foot forwards if you want. Similarly, make sure you're wide enough across the width of the mat. Lightly tone the tum. Breathe through your nose. Find the pelvic floor. Soften the eyes. Raise the brick block or whatever you're using up. Lightly stretch the inner groin from the inner back leg up through the deep belly as a meditative, sort of fascinated point of focus. Inhale, exhale, extend the bottom ribs, breathe through your nose. Big toe side is the most likely position for comfort for most, but little toe side's fine for some. I actually often find myself
I don't know if it's a helpful tip for you or not, but I often find myself coming forwards, pushing the pose forwards, just to get more length in the spine. Push the whole pose forwards. So I might lift the back heel up. I might even lift the front heel up. And that really does help me get more extension in the bottom ribs. And then it's easier and calmer to turn. The hand can be on your sacrum, or some people like to raise it up, but it's often raised up when it shouldn't be, because if the body isn't turned very far, when you raise the arm up, all you're really doing is just stretching the rotator cuff muscles. It's not really contributing to the deep massage of the back muscles as much. This is Parivrita Trikonasana. Reiterative waves, drawing the tummy in, pulling the chest forwards, and breathing, of course, through the nose. Good. Inhale, come up when you're ready. Step forwards on your mat, make sure the mat is clear. Not right to the front, but about a foot, one of your feet lengths, and a half away from the end. In Tadasana, that might be together with the feet or apart. Breathing through the nose, holding those, whatever it is you're holding, weights or shopping bags. For the, I've been going on about these books forever now, where I mentioned that they, both the first one and the second one are both done actually. And, but Ollie's just completing the work on the artwork on the second one. And he just did a beautiful one because I've used a metaphor talking about the goddess and giving her our baggage, like the baggage of me, myself, and I. So he's done this beautiful South Asian style goddess holding birds sort of tied down by baggage. And what that represents is us grasping and labeling things that belong to her as me. And that's like giving, so there's two things that happen then. Prakriti, that is nature, gets inhibited from her natural flow. And we feel so that our foundations are insecure because Prakriti is always flowing. Raise the arms up, lightly tone the tummy, investigatively. Inhale, exhale. Folding, hands flat. So 9 times out of 10, that's going to mean bending the knees. Perhaps you've got long torso, long arms. So in that scenario, it may not be that you need to bend the knees, but still, one should not experience any dullness, aching or pain in the back whatsoever. And so if you do, and your legs are straight, they're probably bent, which is the right thing, I think, for most people. But if they are straight, it might be that you can release the back by moving the feet and therefore the tissue all the way along the back chain. That will help to release the hamstrings and therefore the pelvis and therefore the back. So don't underestimate how much more you can untie yourself, as it were, by moving your feet. And this applies to bent legs as well. Moving your feet, massaging repeatedly, playing with the height of the pelvis and so on. From here, we're going to step back into Adho Mukha Svanasana. That's downward facing dog, I think you know. And plant your palms. I sort of pad mine into a deeper and deeper and deeper weave with the mat. Don't hold the breath. Extend the outer arms, extend the inner arms, extend the under armpits. The under armpits is if you divide an armpit into a top and bottom. At the top, this is when your arms are stretched up like they are now. The top is the part nearer the head and the bottom part is the part nearer the thighs. Extend the part nearer the thighs, the lower half, towards the thighs in repeated waves. Well done, gang. Come down to kneeling. Obviously, we can take supports in terms of block or blocks underneath between the heels and buttocks, or a folded blanket. That can make more space for the knees. If the ankles are tight or compressing, or you feel cramp in the foot arches, then a rolled up blanket is helpful there. Breathing through your nose, rolling on the shins, jaw soft, shoulders down. Natural, organic, honest. Breathing, natural, organic, honest. Breathing, natural, organic, honest. Breathing. Come onto your hands and knees and bring your hands near to your knees, turning the hands the other way round. So the heels of the hands face away from the knees. And then as a meditator, we study for the purpose of meditation, which we can also call absorption. Meditation is returning to the Devi, what is hers, which is everything, and taking away these bags from her, this sort of luggage, this baggage, that some things are mine, it's just like, this is mine. Such terrible baggage for the goddess. The goddess is a metaphor for the whole of existence. Early Buddhists don't call it the goddess, they call it praticca samuppada, which is, less romantic, less poetic. It just means conditioned co-production. Great. Peel the hands up. Take it slow. Turning them the other way and bringing yourself down to your forearms with toes tucked under. So there's a good chance to stretch the plantar fascia on the soles of the feet, which you might do by tucking the toes under and then just gently rolling left or right or moving forwards and backwards. We don't hold our breath, of course. We let that flow. We keep the eyes and brain and tongue soft. Eyes and brain and tongue soft. So it should be natural. Okay, from there, we're going to bring ourselves up, stretching one leg back at a time and slanting the body at a diagonal angle from shoulder blades to buttocks, from buttocks to heels. We don't want the pelvis too low, and we don't want the pelvis higher than the shoulder blades either. We also want to share the load and continue to honor this principle that the poses should be relaxed. The effort in the pose. So there is effort, but it's relaxed effort. It has a flavor of relaxation, of like being chilled out. So that might involve movement, moving left, moving right, etc. Lower your knees to touch the floor super lightly and hang out there for a few breaths. Lift only one knee, keeping the other touching the floor super lightly. Bring that knee that you raised up down, raise the other. Bring both up. Knees forwards. Sit up. Take a breath. Deep and expressive. Deep on the way in, expressive on the way out. And just letting these breaths come and go and come and go and come and go and come and go. Jaw soft, eyes soft, temples soft, brain soft, tongue soft in the mouth. Now you might have a bolster, in which case get that now, but many of us don't. And actually sometimes blankets and towels work out better than a bolster because they lay a bit flatter and some bolsters are a bit too thick. So if you've got blankets or towels, then you're going to pleat them up to make, if you've got two, you can put one on top of the other, or you can put two blocks down and put your
neatly pleated blanket on top like that. You're going to also, yeah, it is Supta Baddha Konasana, by the way, if you're thinking that. You're going to also need some extra support for your head, which can be a small cushion or a blanket, another blanket, or a block. So I'm going to use a block because I think it will show up better for you. Although I'm using green blocks on a green mat, white blanket with a white background. It's not that useful. Okay, once you've set that up, and it could be a bolster that you've got there. If you've got a bolster you use for this, that's fine. If you know your back gets tight, do make sure you've got some supports for underneath your knees from the get-go, and that they're same height as each other. Then bring the belt around your feet underneath the little toe side, round the inner thighs. As yoga, if anyone here's a yoga teacher, you'll know that one of the most common mistakes is to bring it around the outer thighs. Keep it low so that my blue belt is on my blue shorts here. And then you do it up. Usually there's 2 rings on some of them, the D rings. You go through both and then back through one. There's also the square buckle, in which case there's a sort of square with a flexible piece of metal in the middle of that. And you go on the side of that flexible piece of metal that's closest to material. So the material goes near the material and then back through the other way. Anyway, hopefully you'll figure it out. Taut but not tight, the belt. And then 2 options, either hands on the floor or hands on the lift, which I find both can be helpful. And it's got to be a scooting under, turning your pelvis without traveling. That means you're focusing on the tilt, but you're not really moving away from the blocks. And then suck in the tummy and keep your chin towards your chest and do everything you can to get every millimeter of your lower back onto the lift without 1 millimeter of your sacrum, that's the back of the pelvis, anywhere near it. I just adjusted my belts because if the belts are too far out into the thigh tissue, then that can press on the thigh tissue and lift the knees up. And as I say, if your knees if your knees go down low, then there's a chance that will fulcrum your lower back up. So have some support underneath the knees in that, if that's the case. If you're uncomfortable, it can be very easy just to come up again and do a bit more stretch. But do watch out. Sometimes we have a bit of the back of the pelvis on the lift, and that might be why the back's uncomfortable. The arms can stretch out to the sides if you want. And the breathing's deep. And as a yoga teacher, the corrections I do when people are uncomfortable in the back is, number 1, I check that their lift is in the right place. It's not too low down on the pelvis, and it's not too high up. Number 2, I make sure people have come into it correctly. They've scooted the buttocks under in the right direction, and they've stretched the back as they come down. So these are things you can check for yourself. Number 3, I look and think, okay, their back's uncomfortable, their legs are low. That goes together. So you put some support underneath the legs. So that's normally enough, but there are 1 or 2 people who find this lift too high and can take a lower lift with a thin blanket roll going underneath the bottom edge of the shoulder blades, and that's pretty much everyone taken care of then. Jaw soft, eyes soft, throat soft, brain soft. So remember, if you become uncomfortable, it's probably because either A, you didn't come into it correctly, scooting the buttocks one way and stretching the back over the lift, or you didn't position yourself correctly, the lift is pressing into the back of the pelvis, or it's too high up the back, or you need supports underneath your knees and you haven't got them, or less common but possible, the lift is too high for you. That's more or less it. There are a few more things.
It's just about the breath now. Just about the breath. It should come and go naturally, organically, enjoyably even, dare I say, enjoyable. We're going to take about 20, more or less, breaths, and we're not going to count these breaths. I'll do that for you, but what we're going to do is just see if we can, over this next, it's now about 15 breaths, and we can now just forgive, melt, let everything melt back together instead of compartmentalizing it. Keep that jaw soft, and the temples will soften too. A couple more breaths before we come up. Let's enjoy those. You might even sneak a third one in. And then, sadly, bring your arms either towards the buttocks or just by the sides of the body and press resolutely. The only negative about staying too long is that the body doesn't like coming up. So that's why we didn't stay too long, I hope. And once you're up, you can undo your belt or just slip it off like I've done here. And we're going, now you should, if you've made the blanket version anyway, you should have a nice neatly pleated blanket ready to go. And that therefore is easy for you to roll up and to create a snail out of. Okay, so be kind of robust with your hands. If you've got big hands, I think it's easier than if you've got small hands, but you can still do it. And you make a sort of snail ready for Matsyasana. If it didn't go quite right, you've had a bit of a snailya, then, thank you, then obviously you can rip it up and start again. I should credit the band Orange Juice for that lyric from the 1980s, Edwyn Collins. Now I put my snail on a yoga block. I like the extra height. If you've got the elasticity in the spine or your back's very long, that could be a good option. But I think most people should start with, even if they're putting their block like that, with a couple of blocks for their head and a block for their hands like that, right? That's the sort of minimum. If you know the pose well, if you practice it regularly, my snail's a bit of a snailier actually, then of course you can instead dispense with the blocks for underneath your head. Anyway, it's cross-legged position. You might know it already. The important thing, the thing that people get wrong with this is that they put the snail too low down in the back. So you might make sure you avoid that. It shouldn't be in the lumbar. You should feel that it's pressing against the ribs, which are above the lumbar. the bum stays on the floor and your head comes down to the blocks and hands to the other block. Again, I just want to repeat that it shouldn't be anywhere near your lumbar, which is much softer, the 5 bones of the lower back beneath the ribs and above the pelvis. So that's a great stretch. Obviously, if you're longer or the body's got that elasticity, it may be that you remove blocks over time, but I think it's really highly recommended to at least start with those extra blocks for the hands and head. And it's fairly dynamic in terms of the engagement. If your back feels achy, probably got the lift too low, or you're not supported high enough in the head and hands. Keep the jaw soft. Great. Come on up. Again, similarly to the last pose, if you stay too long, you might never get up. And I'm not there to help you in real life, as it were. Well, I am in real life. Yep, I'm real. But I can't reach through the screen and physically pick you up. Take a breath, just sitting cross-legged. Once you're up, draw the buttock flesh out and back if you haven't already. Palms up. This, of course, is the beautiful Sukhasana. Shoulders down. And we remember from before when we were doing Tadasana and right at the beginning of the class, Kayotsaga, that there's a beautiful juxtaposition between the shoulders down and the spine up. Beautiful juxtaposition. Next time you take an inhalation, lift up from the inner groins with it. And as you exhale, turn. I'm turning towards you. You can turn either direction because we're going to do both. And breathe easy. It says Parivrita, Sukhasana. Eyes soft, brain soft. Breathing through the nose. Lift and keep lifting as you turn the other way. Same pose, other direction. Empty of grasping, aparigraha. Natural, should be natural. Jaw soft, temples soft, brain soft, tongue soft. Good job. Return to center. Stretch out your legs. And draw the buttock flesh out and back. Quite possibly sitting on a block. We're going to be coming to Paschimottanasana. I actually think that it's better to sit on a blanket than a block for Paschimottanasana. Just because of the slightly unforgiving edge of the block. If you get it just right, it's fine. The criteria, of course, is if you're sitting on the floor, you need to be able to feel your lower back is drawn into its natural inward curve, which means the pelvis has to come from a backward position like this to a
forward position. So a position where the water's sort of tipping out backwards, to a position, using our metaphor from earlier, to a position where the water, if there were water in the pelvic bowl, it would be just even, balanced, level. Then we're going to use a belt, at least for the beginning. Depends on the length of your arms again, and relative to the length of your legs. If you've got, for example, short legs and long arms, then there's a chance you don't need to use the belt at all in that case. But most of us probably will, at least initially. And then you're pulling the pelvis to that upright position where the water in the metaphorical bowl is level. And then we want to actually try to tip the water out forwardly. Now, of course, what's stopping that is two things, really. Hamstring muscles holding the sitting bone, stopping them moving backwards, which they need to feel that they can do. And compression between the pelvis as it comes forward and the thighs. So regarding the first, which is a tensile problem, time, breath, and calmness, as Patanjali tells us. Calmness. It's easy to think you know that one is trying to get one's head close to the legs, but one is not. This subject is called integration, and so that's what one's trying for. Integration. So I always think of that John Lennon, "Come Together Over Me." The poses are singing that. Come together over me. Use the pose to bring the dissipated parts of ourselves back home. Jaw soft, eyes soft, brain soft. Breathing natural. Jaw soft, eyes soft, brain soft. Breathing natural. Perhaps there's a bit of movement side to side. Regarding the other possible obstacle, the thigh bones getting in the way of the pelvis, then this is again a sort of profound release, because the thigh bones are being pulled up by tension. So if we can imagine and feel that tension, which is associated with being someone going somewhere, that tension and releasing, then the pelvis can tip more easily. Really good. Very slowly, wherever we are, we'll come up, and we might have moved just a little bit forwards. All we want to do is get the pelvis to the upright. That's enough of a goal. And maybe if it gets to that point when it's tipping it forwards, we're going to lay down on our backs. I believe, yeah, we're going to lay down on our backs for the pose, which isn't a pose. That is to say, what comes to be known as Shavasana, the so-called corpse pose, but it doesn't get known as that until we get to the Hatha Pradipika. Before that, this is simply known as one of the Sankhetas, the practices for dissolution, for dissolving. So make sure you've got some head support. Could be a neatly folded blanket if your head tips back. Make sure you've got lots of space for your arms. And make sure you're warm enough. And it's a little scoot under of those shoulder blades, palms up. Make sure there's a dog barking in the distance if you can. I've provided one for you in case you haven't got your own. Eyes soft. So this practice, remember, is a practice that's supposed to be there for laya, L-A-Y-A, which means melting in Sanskrit. It's the same root that's also used to describe the melting of glaciers. And it reminds me of another Beatles song, which of course is the George Harrison one, Here Comes the Sun. Because there's something that's very beautiful about that song, which seems to be more than just talking about the winter being over. There's a sense of a sort of spiritual winter. A spiritual winter thawing. What is that winter? That is the winter of our gripping, grasping, grabbing. Hong Po, the Zen teacher from 850, describing this experience beyond grasping, says, "It is an all-pervading, spotless beauty. It is the self-existent and uncreated absolute. Then how can it even be a matter for discussion that the real Buddha has no mouth and preaches no Dhamma, or that real hearing requires no ears? For who could hear it? Ah, it is a jewel beyond all price." Ungraspable, unfathomable, unnameable. It is a jewel beyond all price. I'm going to recommend that if you've got time to lay longer, that you do. And at the end of that time, which you might need to be now if you've got a particular limited amount of time. But at the end of your practice, which could be now or in a minute or in 5, the toes are going to move, the fingers are going to move. There's going to be a little stretching, various kinds of stretching, feeling into the body that will be followed in turn by bending of the legs, placing the soles of the feet on the floor, scooting the buttocks under,
And taking a couple of deep breaths as the lower back releases. That will then be followed by rolling onto the left side with the knees up, and then followed by rolling onto the right side from where, when the time comes, we'll come up. And so if you're continuing to lay, please enjoy that. Let the poses really digest. In your heart, you can affirm the following words by repeating Om, or you can even repeat it out loud. But just feel it in your heart. And remember, Om means I agree. So here are the words. May any benefit gained in our acting in this way this evening go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings. Om. My huge appreciation. Be happy and well. See you at the next one. Yeah, spaces, a few spaces left on the retreat that I'm running this October, the Quaves. It's on the website. And next year we're going to Gambia, and we're going to Turkey, and we're going to Morocco, and we're going to France. So there's lots of trips you can join us on if you want. All on the website. That's an advert. Thanks. Love you. See you soon.
See you. Bye, Jim.
Ciao.
Bye.